Hello and welcome. My name is Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. Today we are coming to you from the Ghazipur border at the edge of the capital. This is one of the sites where farmers have been camping for the last 6 months. Farmers are marking today as a black day at multiple protest sites, except that there's something very different from the earlier time that we were reporting these protests. We're now at the peak of the second wave, and the decision of the farmers to not go back, to even mark this day as a black day to commemorate 6 months of their protests, has triggered a huge debate with many people who previously supported the protest saying that this is irresponsible. The government appealed to the farmers saying that protests at this time could result in being a super spreader event, but 12 opposition parties have backed these protests. Let's bring you some images from the protests that we've seen. Where I'm sitting is actually quite muted, but these are some of the images that have come in from different parts of the country, in particular North India, where these protests are taking place at different points in the capital, and of course the adjoining states of Haryana, in Punjab in particular, from where many of these farmers come. Now, as you can see, this is not exactly anything like following COVID protocols. There were, there's a huge amount of press, but there's of course also farmers making their point, saying that they're going to, fight till the bitter end. And those who support the farmers say that if these are men and women who are now vulnerable to COVID, that onus is on the government. Why is the government pushing through a farm law at a crisis time like this? The government has appealed to the farmers to call off their protests. The opposition is supporting these protests. And the question is whether the discourse around the farmers' protests actually exposes the hypocrisy of both the ruling party and the opposition. Because remember, the government did not show the same alacrity in terms of calling, let's say, election rallies or the Kumbh Mela a super spreader event. And the opposition, which has slammed the government for doing that, is today supporting these farmers' protests, with the exception, by the way, of the Punjab Chief Minister Amrinder Singh, who did appeal to the farmers to not, to be very mindful of COVID. Now, let me introduce our panel on the program today as we ask who is the onus on for the fact that these protests are still continuing. We have Hindol Sengupta, who's an author and a journalist. Welcome to the program. We have Tavleen Singh, who started off as somebody who really argued that the government needed to listen to the farmers, but her latest tweet did actually say that the farmers would lose support if they continued like this. And we have Avik Saha, who's with the Kisan Andolan and has supported the Kisans from the very beginning. Before I come to all three of you, I want to actually bring you some voices from the ground, right? The farmers told our team that this was a life and death fight for them, and therefore they were not going to budge an inch. And they said, "ये हमारी जिंदगी की लड़ाई है और हम यहीं रहेंगे, हम यहाँ से नहीं जाएंगे वापस." So let's please play out the voice of the farmers on why they're still protesting even through COVID 6 months later.
ये जो 3 कृषि कानून सरकार जो लेके आई थी, इसके खिलाफ पंजाब के सरकारों ने जून में ही मूवमेंट शुरू किया था। पंजाब के किसानों ने जून में मूवमेंट शुरू किया था। उसके बाद शुरू होते होते 26 तारीख को ये किसान दिल्ली की बॉर्डर पे आए। दिल्ली की सरकार से मिलना चाहते थे, बात करना चाहते थे, लेकिन मोदी सरकार ने उनको बॉर्डर पे रोक दिया। और तब से लेकर अब तक ये यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं। 11 बार सरकार से वार्ता हो चुकी है, लेकिन कोई नतीजा नहीं निकला। और अभी सरकार बिल्कुल चुप्पी साधी बैठी है। क्यों बैठी है? क्योंकि वो सोच रही है कि किसानों ने कड़कती ठंड का सामना कर दिया, हम वार्ता को लंबा खींचें, बोर होंगे, चले जाएंगे। लेकिन ऐसा नहीं होगा, क्योंकि किसान जज्बात के साथ नहीं, ये होश के साथ पूरा लड़ रहे हैं। ये जानते हैं कि लड़ाई हमारे जीवन की लड़ाई है, ये लड़ाई हमारी ज़मीन की लड़ाई है। अगर ज़मीन नहीं बची तो वो कहाँ जाएंगे?
So very completely unflinching response continues from farmers on the ground. And the other thing, and this I experienced even when I was reporting the farmers' protest, but this, by the way, to be fair, is a kind of denial that has existed among many people, even in villages that I've met. There's an initial sort of refusal to believe that COVID is real, maybe because of stigma, maybe because of other reasons. A number of farmers at these protest sites continue to believe that COVID is being used as an excuse to actually try and dent their movement. And this is how the farmers responded when our reporters asked them about COVID.
देखो, ऐसा है कि हमारे यहाँ कोई कोरोना नहीं है, हम ये कहते हैं कि जब का मोर्चा चल रहा है, सरकार जितना मर्जी झूठ बोले, यहाँ पे एक भी कोरोना का पेशेंट नहीं आया, ना कोई कोरोना से डेथ हुई है। हम प्रिकॉशन लेते हैं, यहाँ पे सैनिटाइज भी करते हैं, हम जो गर्म पानी भी चलता है, विटामिन सी विटामिन डी भी लेते हैं, सब कुछ प्रिकॉशन है। और मास्क की हम लोड़ नहीं समझते, क्योंकि ऑक्सीजन में कमी आ सकती है, इससे कोरोना है ही नहीं यहाँ पे। हम तो कहते हैं खुला कि पंजाब हरियाणा से सारे देश से लोग आओ, यहाँ सिंघू बॉर्डर आओ, टिकरी आओ। अगर कोरोना को मात देनी है, हम कोरोना को मात यहाँ पे देते हैं। कोई कोरोना नहीं है, सरकार का फ्रेब है, झूठ है, जो मोर्चे को फेल करने के लिए कर रही है।
अच्छा, एक बात बताइए सर, और दूसरा जो गवर्नमेंट ने कुंभ कराया था जिसमें लाखों श्रद्धालु गए थे जो, और उसमें बहुत सारे लोगों को कोविड हो गया, जिससे बहुत लाखों की तादाद में डेथ कर गए। आपको उससे डर नहीं लगता?
कोरोना की वजह से देखो ऐसा है, मैं तो पहले ही बता दिया कि कोरोना की वजह से ये एक बीमारी तो है, महामारी तो है नहीं। और हमारे यहाँ तो मोर्चे के ऊपर तो मैं पहले ही बोला आपको कि किसी की कोरोना से डेथ हुई नहीं। तो पंजाब से भी सरकार भय तो जरूर फैला रही है। भय इसलिए फैला रही है कि बहुत तादाद में लोग मोर्चे में शामिल ना हो, इसलिए। पर हमने तो बोला है, आप देखना, हमने 10-12 तारीख को कहा बहुत बड़े काफिले जो कारोंगे से मोर्चे की तरफ आए। अभी 28, 29, 30 तारीख को पंजाब से, हरियाणा से, देश के और प्रांतों से बहुत बड़ी संख्या में लोग मोर्चे पर आएंगे और काफिले करके आएंगे। तो ऐसा भय, ऐसा डर जो सहम सरकार फैला रही है, तो हमारा इससे कोई लेना देना नहीं है। हमारा मुख्य मंतव्य है कि हम तो अपने जो खेती कानून सरकार ने बनाए हैं उनके खिलाफ लड़ाई चल रही है। उसी में हमारे 500 साथी शहीद हो गए अब तक। हमारे कोरोना से क्या डर है? हमारे तो शहीद 500 साथी जो लड़ाई के जंगे मैदान संघर्ष में हो गए हैं, तो शहीद हो रहे हैं वो। तो उन शहीदों का भी बलिदान है, उन शहीदों का पैगाम है कि हम इस लड़ाई को और आगे लेके जाएं। और सरकार है जो हमारे से बेइंसाफी भी कर रही है, धक्का भी कर रही है, और इन कानूनों को बढ़ा के लोगों की मांगे मानने के लिए तैयार नहीं। हम आंदोलन मजबूत करें, सरकार को झुका दें, हमारे खेती कानून रद्द करें।
All right, so this is, this is unvarnished voices from the ground. We can't seem to convince the farmers that COVID is real, that 3 lakh people have officially died, and many people believe that 10 times more have actually died. So to say that COVID doesn't exist is obviously nonsense, but this is how the farmers think at the protest site, and the question remains, whose moral responsibility is it that these protests are carrying on in the age of the pandemic? That's where the debate lies. Tavleen, I'll start with you, because what you tweeted is pretty much what I tweeted. We were both people who started off slamming the government for its very pathetic, poor handling of those protests, that groundswell of anger, but equally believed that it was not correct for these protests to take place at this time. I don't know about you, but when I said this, I was savaged by those who call themselves liberals, and I said to those liberals that they were mirror images of the right wing that they claim to abhor. I don't know what responses your tweet got, but when you see the kind of voices from the ground, the woman who says this is a life and death fight for me, the Sardarji who says COVID is just a conspiracy to end our movement, what does it make you think?
Well, for a start, I think that everyone is being irresponsible. The government has been extremely irresponsible and uncaring about this protest. The farmers at the moment are being irresponsible in not believing the science of what's going on. And the opposition leaders are just pathetically irresponsible. But I think that the real onus for irresponsibility unlimited is on the government, because the elected representatives of these people have not managed to convey to them that they can trust these laws. So, I mean, I frankly think that there should be no protests, because, we know exactly what's going to happen. And God knows how these guys haven't got any corona. You never know with Punjabi, what goes on with them, as you know. But the point is that really the onus to stop this is with the government. And they must now say, okay, we'll meet you halfway and we'll suspend these, we'll rework them. Why is that so hard to do?
So, do you believe that the fact that the farmers are still protesting is on the government and not on the farmers, and that the government, instead of appealing to them to call off the protests, which they did, the government needed to assure them that these laws are not coming through now or ever, because that's where the conflict has always been.
You know, my brother is a farmer in North India, in Haryana, and he is with these farmers in that there's a system that exists which would be destroyed by these laws. Now, maybe it won't be destroyed. Maybe these guys need to start thinking of new ways of, doing something. But my brother's quite an intelligent man, by the standards of farmers. And I can't convince him that, we've got that these laws are good. And, I'm not that convinced myself that they're bad. But the fact is that when a government loses the trust of the people that have made that government, and this government has, whether it's on Corona, whether it's on the farmers' agitation, whether it's on the citizens, they've really lost the trust, and that they should be examining why, and they should make the first move and go. Why is it so hard for the Prime Minister to go to the Singhu border or Ghazipur border and say, listen, tell me how we can go forward? He's virtually talking to farmers in Madhya Pradesh and God knows where, but he's never actually addressed these people. So it is on the government, the onus is on them to bring this to an end.
Before I go to Hindol, your tweet which said that the farmers would lose support if they continued through COVID. Do you feel that that's beginning to happen, that right now this is not where public attention is, and public will lose engagement with these protests because people are occupied literally with saving lives of people they love right now? Everybody knows someone who's died from COVID. Do you feel that that's beginning to happen?
I think they have lost a lot of support, and they're going to lose a lot more if they insist on this protest.
Okay. Hindol, let's bring you in. You've never been a big fan of the protests, but obviously it acquires a different dimension that the protests are taking place through the pandemic. But you heard Tavleen. I think she's made a very reasonable argument as someone who supported these protests, or at least thought that the government needed to listen to them. What do you say about the fact that they're happening through the protests, through the COVID pandemic?
I want to flip that argument and ask one simple question. If these protests could be stalled even for a few months, the issue is not going anywhere. Human lives are going to be lost if we keep gathering like this. And if this protest, whatever the organizations of the farmers who are leading this protest, could on humanitarian hold on to whatever protest points they have for a few weeks, for a few months. The numbers are indeed coming down. We don't know sharply they will in the weeks to come. But at this point in time, we have to, as a country, be focused on what is going on with COVID-19 and the hundreds and hundreds of people who have died. I mean, as of today, I lost the father of a very, very close friend, somebody I was very close to. These deaths are happening across the country in all families. To have organizations gather scores of people together at a time like this is really hugely irresponsible. And I think the Punjab Chief Minister is right in appealing to farmer groups, saying that, this cause and this battle that they have is not going away anywhere. There would be more negotiations, there would be more talks, there would be more conversations, maybe there would even be, more friction. But all of this can continue. It can stall for a while as a country we take care of this terrible, terrible crisis that has fallen upon us. And on every family, every person, every family, or any of us knows. So I think on sheer humanitarian grounds, and there are many people like Avik, like many others, Yogendra Yadav, for instance, is a big supporter of the farmer protest. They're all sensible people. Perhaps they could reach some reasonable, methodology in which their voice can continue in what form they want to, but it does not need the physical gathering of hundreds of people.
But can I ask you, before I go to Avik and Abhimanyu, the two farmer representatives on the program, isn't there a hypocrisy in the government response? The same government that is now saying super spreader event for the farmers did not say that when their biggest leaders were campaigning at election rallies, did not say that for the Kumbh, did not say it when it sent UP's government employees forcibly on election duty, in which 1,600 of them are dead. And, isn't the state expected to be more responsible than people out there who are protesting? It is in the end the job of the Indian state to protect its citizens. And to that extent, do we not need to hear from the government an assurance that there is a pandemic on, there are going to be no farm laws, we're shelving them, we're putting them away, please go back home because lives are more important? If the government said that and then the farmers refused, maybe you could make that argument. Hindol.
But here's the interesting point, Barkha. Since you mentioned the Kumbh did come to an early stop. And if we are going to take that example and draw an analogy, then the Punjab chief ministers asked for a stop to this at this point in time. Quite like that, the festival that we are talking about, it happened for a while and then the Prime Minister intervened and then it was brought to an early stop. So therefore, if that's the analogy we're going to draw, surely there is merit in the argument that these protests now, at the very least, should be stalled.
All right. Let me bring in Avik and Abhimanyu. Avik, go ahead. How do you justify, the protests carrying on through COVID? Isn't that going to make you lose your support base?
I'm not going to engage in any whataboutism. I'm not going to say that there is no corona. I'm not going to say that villages are not affected by corona. It exists. But one simple step is being forgotten in this whole debate. The government, which has agreed to stall the laws for 18 months, has to say that we stall it forever. We will renegotiate with you. The government has to simply form a committee to create the law that we are asking for, and we can end this. The ball is square. This COVID crisis that we are facing is something that the government needs to deal with. To tell the farmers to go back, it's all right for us to sit in this debate and say we can gather again. We all of us may not be aware of the logistics and the dynamics that goes into a gathering of this size. The farmers insist only on two things, and the government is putting its politics of public relations far before the pandemic and the protests. If the government flips its own position and understands that it is causing death, actually being responsible for these deaths and these diseases, then we can end this debate and this protest can end. But the government, to protect its asset, the image of the Prime Minister, will not repeal the laws, as if it's such a terrible thing to repeal a law made for those who don't want it. This is the simple argument. If this happens, the protests end. The protest can and should end. But why are we protesting? That lady who was on your screen and who said this is a matter of life and death, it truly is a matter of life and death. This is not an imaginary protest. This is not something that, this is a doomsday scenario that the farmers and their leaders have painted, and the government is, of course, on the right because it wants to create a great future. This government for 7 years has not been able to create a great future. There is zero trust. Barkha, I repeat, zero trust in the Prime Minister. And as we go forward, the trust is decreasing, not increasing. I don't know if it can decrease below zero, but it is
okay,
decreasing.
I think Hindol wants to respond briefly to you, and then I'll go to Abhimanyu ji. Hindol, go ahead.
I just have one point. Avik just said in his own words that the government has already said that the laws has been stalled for 18 months. Even on that basis, even on that logic, even on that analogy, why can we not stall gatherings of people when we know that this is the doomsday scenario? A stalling has already occurred of the laws that these protests are about. So why can't this gathering of people stall even for a while? I mean, it makes no logical sense. You yourself are saying that the laws themselves have been stalled, but you're not ready to stall the protest. That makes no sense.
No, you snuck out some words from what I said. I said after that, there is zero trust in the Prime Minister. So his stalling is, we perceive it as just for us to go back so that he can get on with his games and start playing again. So please understand, we are dealing with a government we don't trust. So we will not go back.
The point is you're also dealing with Corona, and that is what has changed from 6 months ago. And that is the reason why even people like Tavleen, who at that time said that the government, and is still saying that the government mishandled those protests, is saying that you're in serious danger of misreading the public mood, because the public, is concerned right now about life and death issues and would see these protests or anything that is a gathering of more than two. A doctor told me more than 2 people right now is a crowd. More than 2 people is a crowd. Right, Avik? And that's the point. It's, respond and then Abhimanyu ji. Yes.
On 29th, Bengal had its last phase of election. I think the Prime Minister was in Bengal on 27th, and he was proud and he said that this is the largest gathering I have seen. On 10th of April, the Prime Minister said that we have beaten Corona. Between 11th of January, the last meeting, and 10th of April, there were 90 days to negotiate. Come on. Why are we asking the farmers to go back when we are not asking our government these tough questions?
We are. We are. We have all criticized the government, Avik. All of us. Well, I think that, I don't know about Abhimanyu and you, but they have been solidly criticized for continuing with elections, for not ordering vaccines, for botching up the second wave. Of course, they've been criticized. Maybe not as much as they should have, not by as many people as they should have, but they have been criticized. And therefore, these tough questions have been asked of them. Anyway, let me just get Abhimanyu ji in. We'll go around the panel again. Abhimanyu ji, सवाल यही उठाया जा रहा है बार बार कि कोविड के टाइम किसानों को कॉन्ग्रीगेट करना ठीक नहीं है, और आप गलत मैसेज दे रहे हैं, और आपकी अपनी मूवमेंट का सपोर्ट कम हो सकता है, और ये अपनी ही जानों के साथ आप खेल रहे हैं. तो इस पे आप क्या कहेंगे?
देखिए, मैं आपके सवाल का जवाब दूं उससे पहले मैं एक चीज क्लियर कर देना चाहता हूं. अभी हमारे कुछ बड़े एक्सपर्ट लोग बोल रहे थे कि ये तो 18 महीने के लिए स्टे कर दिए गए हैं कोर्ट द्वारा. तो उनकी जानकारी के लिए मैं बता दूं, ये ग्राउंड पे ये फैक्ट सही नहीं है. मैं हरियाणा का एग्जांपल आपको देता हूं. अभी हरियाणा में अब की बार गेहूं के सीजन में क्या हुआ, सभी जो मंडियों में जो आड़ती हैं उनको सबको प्रशासन ने धमकाया, डराया कि आप गेहूं का एक भी दाना मंडी में नहीं डलवाएंगे. उनको बाकायदा नोटिस दिए गए. 17 मंडी पूरे तरीके से बंद कर दी गई. बहुत सारी और मंडियों पे ताले लगाए थे, वो ताले किसानों ने तोड़े हैं, वो ताले हमने तोड़े हैं. स्पष्ट आदेश था कि भाई किसानों का गेहूं डायरेक्ट साइलोज में जाना चाहिए. वो साइलोज किसके हैं? प्राइवेट लोगों के. उन साइलोज में क्या तमाशा हो रहा था? 20-20 किलोमीटर की लंबी लाइन लगी हुई थी. किसानों को 3 दिन 4 दिन वहां पे मच्छरों के बीच में रहना पड़ा. 4 ट्रॉली गेहूं के लेके वो जाते थे.
आपकी आवाज चली गई. अच्छा, आई थिंक वी लॉस्ट हिम. सर अभिमन्यु जी, आपकी आवाज चली गई. Tavleen, do you want to come in on what you've heard Avik say? Can we unmute Tavleen, please? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. My brother tells me the same thing. He's also a farmer in Haryana, and he says it's been a nightmare because they've actually started to implement. You see, what people don't understand who don't deal with farming, and I think that there's not a single farmer in the Prime Minister's inner circle. But my brother said that it's been very hard to sell his stuff this time because the artis are being being threatened, and they're being made to do. And they actually, the arti is, as Avik will tell you, they're not middlemen. They actually are. They are the farmers. They depend on them. When my brother needs a loan, he goes to the arti. So बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे थे. मैं तो आपका वो समर्थन कर रही थी अभी, क्योंकि मेरा भाई भी किसान है हरियाणा में, और वो भी कह रहे हैं कि ये बहुत मुश्किल रहा है इस बार अनाज को बेचना, क्योंकि ये धमकाए जा रहे हैं, आरती को धमका रहा है.
अभिमन्यु जी, आप अपनी बात पूरी कर लीजिए. अगर आपको सुनाई दे रहा है, बोलिए.
जी देखिए, इसमें जो मैं बात कह रहा था, हरियाणा गवर्नमेंट ने कहा था कि 72 घंटे के अंदर पेमेंट होगी. लेकिन अब तक पेमेंट नहीं आई। 20-20, 25-25 दिन हो गए। जब हम उसके इन डेप्थ में गए तो ये मालूम चला कि गवर्नमेंट ने कहा है जब आपका गेहूं अल्टीमेटली साइलोज में चला जाएगा उसके 72 घंटे बाद वो पेमेंट करेंगे। तो कान को आप इस तरीके से पकड़िए या घुमा के पकड़िए, बात तो वहीं पे आ गई। 1975 रुपया एमएसपी है, जो साइलोज के अंदर जो पेमेंट हुई है वो 1964 रुपया 52 पैसे की पेमेंट हुई है। हमारे पास स्लिप है, वो हम दिखा देंगे। तो अल्टीमेटली गवर्नमेंट का टारगेट एक है, मंडियां खत्म करनी है गवर्नमेंट को। वो 3 कानूनों के माध्यम से वो बात कर लीजिए, वही टारगेट है, मंडी खत्म करनी है। जो हरियाणा में ये हुआ नया तमाशा जो गवर्नमेंट ने किया, इसके तहत भी यही हो रहा है। और अब जो आपने बात कही है कि मैं आपको बिल्कुल एक ग्राउंड की ये बात बता रहा हूं बरखा जी, आप इतनी वरिष्ठ पत्रकार है। पिछले 25 सालों में ऑन रिकॉर्ड 5 लाख किसानों की सुसाइड हुई है और ऑफ रिकॉर्ड 25 लाख किसानों की सुसाइड हुई है। ये बड़ी जिम्मेदारी के साथ मैं ये बात कह रहा हूं कि यदि ये तीनों कानून वापस नहीं हुए तो अगले 25 सालों में किसानों की सुसाइड का आंकड़ा कई गुना बढ़ जाएगा, जो कंट्रोल से बाहर हो जाएगा। तो हमारे लिए एक तरफ कुआं है, दूसरी तरफ खाई है। तो हम अपने एग्जिस्टेंस के लिए लड़ाई लड़ रहे हैं और बिल्कुल ठोक के हम ये बात कहते हैं कि 3 काले कानून वापस कराएंगे, एमएसपी गारंटी कानून लागू कराएंगे, उससे पहले हम वापस नहीं जाएंगे। और जहां तक बात कोरोना की है, मैं 10 सेकंड और लूंगा। जहां तक बात कोरोना की है, हमारे सभी धरनों पे हम रेगुलर सैनिटाइज करते हैं पूरे धरनों को। उसके अलावा जो इम्यूनिटी बूस्टर मेडिसिन है वो हम यूज करते हैं, विटामिन की टैबलेट्स हम यूज करते हैं, काढ़ा जो आयुर्वेदिक है वो रेगुलरली हम पर्सनली जाते हैं सभी लंगरों पे और किसानों को मोटिवेट करते हैं, उनके साथ बैठ के काढ़ा पीते हैं। और आप देखिए हमारे धरनों पे एज सच कोई कोरोना केसेस अभी तक
अच्छा नहीं हुए। आप ये आपका कहना है, जब तक टेस्टिंग नहीं होगी हमें नहीं पता चलेगा। लेकिन मैं आपसे एक सवाल पूछूंगी, देन आई विल गो टू हिंडोल। मेरा सवाल अभिमन्यु जी ये है कि आप जो बात कर रहे हैं वो 2 महीने बाद भी कर सकते हैं। सिर्फ अभी ये जो बात चल रही है वो ये है कि आप फिजिकल गैदरिंग्स मत करिए, क्योंकि फिजिकल गैदरिंग्स करना आप अपनी जिंदगी को इंडेंजर कर रहे हैं, आप दूसरों की जिंदगी को इंडेंजर कर रहे हैं। ये बात चल रही है। ये आपके जो मुद्दे हैं उन मुद्दों को नहीं अंडरमाइन किया जा रहा, उन मुद्दों को छोटा नहीं दिखाया जा रहा। बात है कि कोविड के टाइम ये बड़े बड़ी गैदरिंग्स करना ये लापरवाही है, अपनी तरफ भी और दूसरे लोगों की तरफ भी।
देखिए मैं आपको छोटा सा एक एग्जांपल देता हूं इसमें। अभी परसों की बात है, हम हिसार में थे, कई दिन से मैं खुद भी हिसार में था। हिसार में हम गैदरिंग करने के लिए मजबूर किए गए। वो कैसे मजबूर किए गए मैं आपको बताता हूं। 16 तारीख को मुख्यमंत्री मनोहर लाल खट्टर आते हैं, एक हॉस्पिटल का उद्घाटन करने के नाम पे सैकड़ों लोगों की भीड़ जुटाते हैं, कोविड नियम्स का उल्लंघन करते हैं। किसान वहां उनका प्रोटेस्ट करने गए, किसानों के ऊपर हैवी लाठीचार्ज किया गया, हमारी माताओं बहनों के सर फोड़ दिए गए। उसके बावजूद हमने बड़ा दिल दिखाते हुए 16 तारीख को रात को आईजी ऑफिस में बैठक होती है, जब किसानों ने आईजी ऑफिस का घेराव किया। उसके बाद पंचायती फैसला हो जाता है।
आप बोलते रहिए, हाँ बोलिए।
पंचायती फैसला होता है हमारी तरफ से। हमारी डिमांड ये थी, पुलिस वाले जो पत्थर मार रहे थे, वो वीडियोस है, पुलिस वाले जो किसानों को पत्थर मार रहे थे उनके ऊपर मुकदमा हो। तो पुलिस ने रिक्वेस्ट की कि जी ना हमारी तरफ से मुकदमा होगा ना आप कोई मुकदमा, किसानों को रिहा कर दिया गया। तो उसके बाद लेकिन क्या होता है, पंचायती फैसला हो गया, हमने आईजी ऑफिस से चले गए। नेक्स्ट डे अखबार में आईजी की स्टेटमेंट आती है कि किसानों की शिनाख्त की जा रही है, ये उपद्रवी है, कार्रवाई की जाएगी। इस तरीके का एक माहौल बना दिया गया। हम 18 तारीख को आईजी ऑफिस में दोबारा गए बात की, मुद्दे को सुलटाने के लिए, लेकिन फिर वो इधर उधर की बातें करने लग गए। फिर हमें 19 को मजबूरी में पंचायत करनी पड़ी और हमने कहा 24 को आईजी ऑफिस, कमिश्नर ऑफिस का घेराव करेंगे। तो जो पंचायती फैसले का अपमान किया गया प्रशासन द्वारा मुख्यमंत्री मनोहर लाल खट्टर के इशारे पे, ये बड़ा कारण बना 24 तारीख को इतने बड़े गैदरिंग का। और इसके अलावा दूसरी बात, एक लास्ट बात मैं ये कहना चाह रहा हूं, जो बीजेपी वाले नेता कई आर्ग्यूमेंट देते हैं कि आप 2 महीने बाद आके दोबारा आंदोलन यहीं से शुरू कर लीजिएगा, 6 महीने बाद आके दोबारा आंदोलन यहीं से शुरू कर लीजिएगा। देखिए प्रैक्टिकल एस्पेक्ट समझिए, जब हम 6 महीने पहले यहाँ पे आ रहे थे तो सरकार की मर्जी से नहीं आए, सरकार ने तो सारे हथकंडे अपना दिए थे हमें रोकने के लिए, सड़कें खोद दी थी, आंसू गैस के गोले छोड़े थे। तो ये हम अपनी ताकत के बलबूते पर यहाँ पर बैठे हैं, किसी सरकार के रहम पे या सरकार की दया के आधार पर हम यहाँ नहीं बैठे। तो जब तक हमारे अंदर ताकत है हम यहाँ रहेंगे और आंदोलन कंटिन्यूअस चलेगा। तन मन और धन के मामले में हमारा समाज इतनी इन्वेस्टमेंट कर चुका है इस आंदोलन में, अब पीछे हटने का सवाल पैदा नहीं होता है।
मैं कुछ बोलना चाहती हूँ। हिसार में एक्चुअली देयर वाज अ डेथ दैट टुक प्लेस ऑफ अ 69-year-old मैन। लेट मी शो यू दोस पिक्चर्स नाउ बिकॉज दे केम विदाउट कॉन्टेक्स्ट। कैन वी प्ले द पिक्चर्स प्लीज? All right, here are the pictures. There was a death that took place of a 69-year-old man in Hisar during these protests. He was then draped in the tricolor, but he did report breathlessness. The farmers did not accept that this was COVID. They said he had a heart attack. But again, I will say that we do not know what's happening at these protests until tests are done. We do not know who has COVID, who doesn't. The sadhus at Kumbh would have
नहीं
also
बरखा
argued
जी,
that
ये
they were fine.
हार्ट अटैक
Ji,
हम वहां मौजूद थे। मैं जिम्मेदारी के साथ कहता हूं, वहां मौजूद थे। इनको हार्ट अटैक की प्रॉब्लम आई जब हमारा लगभग 11:30 बजे रामायण मैयर टोल से जब हमने कमिश्नरी ऑफिस की तरफ कूच किया था, वहां पे हजारों की संख्या में किसान थे। इनको हार्ट अटैक की प्रॉब्लम आई थी। इनको हार्ट अटैक की प्रॉब्लम थी।
अच्छा अच्छा, सुनिए, मैं आपको एक बात बोलना चाहती हूँ। मैं बहुत गाँव में घूम के आई हूँ। वहां पे भी जब लोगों की डेथ्स होती है तो कहते हैं निमोनिया, टाइफाइड। जब तक टेस्टिंग नहीं होती, आप एक पैंडेमिक के टाइम कॉज ऑफ डेथ हम कोई नहीं with certainty कह सकता, but we need to expand this conversation. Hindol, the point is that I think that this debate has exposed political hypocrisy in both the government and the opposition. The opposition that attacked the government for Kumbh and so on, right? The opposition took part in the elections, so it can't attack it for that, but for the Kumbh they did. They have supported these protests which are seeing mass gathering. Equally, the government that did nothing to stop or events like the Kumbh, and has patronized people like Ramdev, who have even defended the Kumbh and said that it's giving Hinduism and Hindutva a bad name. Today are calling these events super spreader events. We saw even on Twitter a controversy today as somebody even spoke in terms of violence against anyone who's protesting. So Hindol, there's hypocrisy all around.
No, look, I mean, this is we can probably speak all night about the random things and the random mobs online and various people saying various things on our country. And this is a constant. We're a cacophonous, we're an unquiet land. And as you memorably wrote, Barkha,
yeah,
I think we should focus the conversation very squarely on the COVID question. On the point about not enough farmers being able to sell, it is true, as Tavleen pointed out, that perhaps apart from her and Avik, I mean, I am not a farmer, nor are you, so perhaps they know better. But however, as somebody who works with information, I do know that all records suggest that a record amount of wheat and has been purchased and procured this year, both from Punjab and Haryana. This is widely reported, so there's no secret. Perhaps some people are having trouble. I don't know. I'm not in the ground. Tavleen saying her brother is on the ground, so I am not going to dispute that. But the point is, I don't know how a record amount of wheat can be purchased in a year where there is mass trouble, supposedly, with lots of people. So, but I don't know. I'm not going to contest that. My limited point remains this. Today, if we have, and we can keep saying, well, in the past, this person did this, that person did that, this person said this, all of that. But today, wherever it is, if there are mass gatherings in India, wherever that may be, they are basically a call to death. We all know this, and we cannot avoid this. So anybody who wants to do this is essentially putting in that injection of death in that ecosystem, in that society. We have to accept that.
I actually agree that there can be no justification for mass gatherings at this time. Tavleen, you were wanting to say something? Go ahead.
You just put
Sorry,
up.
We can't hear you. We can't hear Tavleen. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. You just put up a tweet from Smita Barua, who is married to a senior official in the government of India. And look what she's saying. Will they consider shoot-at-sight orders? This farmers' protest nonsense has gone on long enough. Now, Sanjeev Sanyal is one of these most senior economic advisors to the Prime Minister. If this is what his wife is saying, you can see that forget about sympathy for the farmers. They haven't even understood that for many farmers, this is a life and death thing. They do not believe these laws will help them. So why is it so hard for the government to actually say, okay, listen, it's gone on too long. Let's just take them back and be done with it. If it's irresponsible for the protest to continue, it's just as irresponsible for the wife of a senior official in the government of India to put up a tweet like that, right?
And
did she just shoot? And by the way, I want Hindol. When did they stop the Kumbh? When it was nearly over. You know, so they were doing no favors. When did they stop the rallies in Bengal? Not till the last moment. Everyone was saying reduce the length of the election. They didn't listen. So, you know, how can
No,
you trust the government?
but Tavleen, does that mean that we should carry on doing more of the same? I mean, I think that's the question right now.
No. The point I'm making is there's no trust in the government left. You know, so
yeah, but the protests.
The protests are a bad idea. They must not happen. But who's going to persuade them when they don't trust the leaders?
Yeah, I just want to say on that tweet. I just want to say on the tweet that she deleted her tweet and said it had been misconstrued. So that's the update on the tweet.
How do you misconstrue what she tweeted? All right,
I don't know.
She's a woman I've had conversations with before on Twitter, and she's a nasty bit of goods. And she has actually, I mean, what shoot at sight orders? Just look at, she's not any old person. She is the wife of Sanjeev Sanyal, and she's tweeting this.
Hindol, you were wanting to respond?
No, not to this point.
Hindol,
I just wanted to. I just
looked up. Let's come out of
the
this
exact
and
number, and I wanted to.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? I wanted to ask one question to the farmer representative and to Avik also. I just looked up the numbers because I couldn't remember the numbers. 129 lakh tons of wheat has been procured from Punjab, which is supposed to be the highest in 10 years. I just want to understand, since we are debating this, if there is such a big crisis and farmers are not being able to sell at the right price, how is it that in a decade, the highest levels of procurement of wheat, 129 lakh tons, has happened?
Okay. Avik, do you want to take that because you've been wanting to speak for a while? Yeah, Avik?
Hindol, have you heard the expression confidence trickster? In the perception of the farmers, the Prime Minister is a confidence trickster because he wants to actually disband and destroy the mandi system, as Abhimanyu Bhai said. This year, to convince us that he will not do it, the procurement has gone up. That is what you have to understand about procurement. And what we are saying is this procurement and this methodology has to continue. Abhimanyu Bhai, एक चीज आपको मैं बता दूं, मैंने ये नहीं कहा था कि 18 महीने की कोई बात हो गई है। मैंने कहा था उनकी तरफ से ये 18
Avik,
just 1 minute.
Sorry, I just want to first. अच्छा, आप पहले बोलिए.
Yeah. मैंने ये कहा कि 18 महीने की उनकी तरफ से प्रस्ताव यदि स्थगित करने का था तो पूरा ही रद्द कर दे, क्या दिक्कत है? अब स्थगित करेंगे तो रद्द क्यों नहीं करेंगे? मेरा कहना ये है.
Yes, एक minute. No, I mean, I just want to hear the first part of your response. Isn't that a very complex theory that they're lulling us into comfort with record procurement? I mean, is that a convincing response?
If you look at the infrastructure on the ground, this is imagination. If you look at the Adani silos created all over the country, which Adani himself advertises on his website, you will understand that the system these laws are supposed to create. The government is out of procurement, the government is out of guaranteeing price, and the private players will give price. The Prime Minister is quite open. He's saying it openly. He's not hiding it. So on the issue of what we are debating today, Barkha, if we just look at it, three things. Should there be large gatherings during pandemic? No. The question we asked is, who is causing these gatherings? Some of us believe that these gatherings. Abhimanyu Bhai and I are saying that the government is forcing and causing these gatherings. The government should look into its public relation. People should be cursing this government. The government should accept the demands and stop gathering. We do not like to gather for the heck of gathering. We have no other option. The debate should be, why is the government not repealing the laws?
But the government is not, as Hindol said, the government is also not immediately bringing in any law. I would understand the protests carrying on during COVID if the government had chosen this moment to try and push through the law. Then I would understand. मैं अभिमन्यु जी आपसे भी यही सवाल करूंगी कि जब 18 महीने तक ये कानून नहीं आ रहा तो क्या हो जाएगा अगर आप ऐसे वक्त पर बड़ी गैदरिंग्स में लोगों को नहीं लाएंगे? आप कितना भी काढ़ा पी ले, आप कितना भी विटामिन डी खा ले, कोरोना जो है वो हवा के थ्रू फैलता है. वी नो दिस नाउ. अगर लोग एक जगह एकत्रित होते हैं तो आप अपनी जिंदगी और दूसरों की जिंदगी को रिस्क पे डाल रहे हैं। ये साइंस ने इस्टेब्लिश कर दिया है, इसकी कोई दो राय नहीं है। ये सवाल अब ये है, अगर सरकार इस समय कानून पुश कर रही होती तो मैं आपकी बात समझ सकती थी, लेकिन सरकार कोई कानून तो नहीं ला रही इस समय।
देखिए, मैं इसका एक काउंटर क्वेश्चन आपसे पूछता हूँ। गवर्नमेंट कह रही है कि वो 18 महीने के लिए इसे सस्पेंड कर देंगे। हम ये कह रहे हैं आज आप उसको रद्द कर दीजिए, उसके बाद एक दोबारा कमेटी बना लीजिएगा। 18 महीने बाद वो कमेटी चर्चा करके, जिसमें किसान भी हो, जिसमें बाकी लोग भी हो, तो जो इसमें सुधार करना है, जो भी कुछ करना है, ये बनाने हैं नहीं बनाने हैं, इसका फैसला वो कमेटी कर देगी। एक बार आप रिपील तो कर दीजिए। मुझे एक चीज बरखा जी इसमें समझ नहीं आ रही कि सरकार इतना जिद क्यों कर रही है। यदि जनता जिद करे तो 1 मिनट के लिए समझ में भी आ जाता है। जिस जनता ने वोट दे के इस सरकार को चुना था, ये सरकार आज उसी जनता को हरा के जीतना चाहती है। ये बात मेरी समझ में नहीं आ रही है। और जो बात अभी आदरणीय अवीक जी ने कही, जो मैंने पहले कमेंट किया था अवीक जी, वो आपकी बात पे नहीं किया था, जो हमारे एक साथी कह रहे थे, दूसरे पैनलिस्ट, मैंने उनकी बात पे कमेंट किया था। और दूसरी बात इसमें जो अभी साथी कह रहे थे कि प्रोक्यूरमेंट बहुत ज्यादा हुई है, ये हुआ है, मैं एक बात आपको कह रहा हूं, ये सीएसीपी जो प्राइस डिक्लेयर करती है, हर बार उसमें इंक्रीमेंट होता है, लेकिन 2014 से पहले वो इंक्रीमेंट का परसेंटेज कितना था, आप उस परसेंटेज को देखिए, और आप आज के इंक्रीमेंट के परसेंटेज को देखिए, आज का परसेंटेज बहुत कम है। ये हमें समझना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि पिछली बार जो अभी पैडी की प्रोक्यूरमेंट हुई थी, जो जिसका एमएसपी 1868 रुपया है, वो 1000 रुपए 1200 रुपए में पिटी है। वो आप आइए, हम आपको 50 जगह नहीं, कई हजार जगह वो दिखा देंगे कि 1868 वाली एमएसपी वाली जो पैडी थी, वो 800 रुपए 900 रुपए में पिटी है। 5-5 दिन मंडी में रहे, छठे दिन अपने घरों में वापस लौटना पड़ा है। ये ग्राउंड हकीकत है। और प्लीज, मैं बड़ी ही विनम्रता पूर्वक, बड़ी रिस्पेक्ट के साथ मैं ये निवेदन करना चाहता हूं, हम यदि बंद कमरों से बाहर निकल के यदि ग्राउंड की रियलिटी देखेंगे ना, तो तब हम समझ पाएंगे आज किसान अपनी एग्जिस्टेंस की लड़ाई लड़ रहा है। जो पत्रकार ग्राउंड रिपोर्टिंग करते हैं उनको पता है किस चीज में हम जी रहे हैं। 6 महीने हो गए, पूरी सर्दी निकाल दी, आज के दिन मच्छर इतना परेशान कर रहे हैं। ये हमारी मजबूरी है, हमें कोई शौक नहीं है सड़कों में बैठने का। गवर्नमेंट एक काम करे, यदि गवर्नमेंट हमारी हेल्थ को लेके इतनी ही चिंतित है, तो गवर्नमेंट पहली कलम से नेक्स्ट मिनट ये कह दे, तीनों लॉज रिपील कर दिए और एमएसपी गारंटी कानून दे दिया, हम अगले ही सेकंड अपने घर चले जाएंगे। और लास्ट बात बरखा जी, ये हम याद दिलाना चाहते हैं, 2011 में जब हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी, मुख्यमंत्री मोदी जी होते थे और कंज्यूमर अफेयर कमेटी के चेयरमैन थे, तो इन्होंने ही एक रिपोर्ट उस समय के तत्कालीन प्रधानमंत्री मनमोहन सिंह जी को भेजी थी। उसके पॉइंट नंबर B3 में इन्होंने लिखा था कि किसानों के लिए एमएसपी की गारंटी होनी चाहिए। तो मोदी जी 10 साल बाद हम भी तो वही बात कह रहे हैं। आज आप कहते हैं कि आपके पास बजट नहीं है, दूसरी तरफ आपने एफसीआई को दी जाने वाली खाने की सब्सिडी बंद कर दी 2016 के बाद से। एफसीआई पे कर्जा 2014 के बाद।
जी, आप याद दिला रहे हैं कि जब मोदी जी मुख्यमंत्री थे तो उनका इस पे दूसरा राय था। We got the gist of your argument, so let me just give the last word to Hindol and Tavleen because we're at the end of the show. Hindol, to you first, and then I'll give Tavleen the last word. Is there onus on the government? I think we all agree that the protests at this time, gatherings at this time, are suicidal and also a danger to other people. The question is, who's the onus on to contain this?
The onus of this, the onus must be on the people who are actually on the ground protesting, and especially since the Punjab Chief Minister himself has also come out and said that this should not happen at this time. Perhaps on purely humanitarian grounds, this should be re-looked at.
Okay, Tavleen, as someone who believes that the protesters and the government are both wrong, and Amrinder, I think, has shown a certain break from his own party in saying, please don't do this. And he's been his own self. And I think he's saying the sensible thing. Do you not think that should be what defines even the opposition response?
I totally agree that the protests are wrong, but I totally disagree with Hindol when he says, oh, it's on the onus is on the people. What the farmer just now said is true. We've elected these people. And the people are saying, we don't want these wretched laws. Now, why are you trying to force them down when you've already made a huge mess of the handling of the pandemic? And, the onus is totally on the government to say, okay, because of the pandemic and because of the unusual situation and because of the anger of the farmers for so long, it's a year. we take them back. Otherwise, it sounds as though you're trying to help corporations who you favor. And that's what the farmers believe.
But the government would argue, as Hindol has also argued, that the laws are in abeyance in any case. It's not like the laws are going through at this time.
What this guy just said is true, that they're already beginning to be implemented. There's a great confusion on the ground, according to my brother. I'm not the farmer. I haven't been in the mandis, but I know from him that there's already confusion about what is happening. And there's a conviction that the mandi system on which they depend on whatever little income they have, that's going to be destroyed. And is being destroyed to favor corporations. So the onus to stop this is on the government.
We've had no consensus on this program, and in the meantime, at sites like the one where I'm sitting at, the tents are still up. The farmers have been living here literally for 6 months. It doesn't look like they're going home anytime soon. That is not good news for our handling of the COVID pandemic, and I would urge the farm leaderships to reflect on that. But equally, the government, as the state, also needs to reach out to the citizens. Sorry, Avik, you're wanting a line there? Just quickly bring in a line, then I'm wrapping.
I missed it. Assuming for the sake of argument, the farmers go back and want to come back after they are vaccinated. Can this government provide them that vaccine? Tell us what's the timeline for us to come back to our protest. You cannot vaccinate us. You cannot give us protection against the disease. And you want us to call off the agitation because there's a pandemic. This is complete doublespeak. Thank you.
Hindol, do you want to respond to that? And then we'll close.
Make the point that it is a bit funny that on a year where supposedly there's trouble in actually farmers selling their produce, the highest ever sale of producers happened in 10 years, in a decade, and supposedly there's trouble on the ground. Now the answer to that could be, you're not a farmer, you don't know. I accept I'm not a farmer, but these are all reported figures, right? And my second point is, the Punjab Chief Minister is very clear that he has requested the farmers to go home, and these laws have been stalled, as you said, for 18 months. All of this suggests that perhaps this protest could be re-looked at.
Can I be unmuted? Yeah, okay. I'm saying the stalemate both in terms of consensus on the program and the farmers' protest continues here on the ground. We'll have to leave it there. The farmers aren't going home, and that's the reality of the situation. That's what's happening here on the ground, and during COVID, it does worry me. I feel like the arguments that could be applied at another time couldn't be applied, but equally the farmers say, as you just heard Avik saying, that if we wrap up and go home, the government gets what it wants, and then they will push the laws through, and that's where the gap is. We'll have to leave it there. Tavleen, Hindol, Avik, and to Abhimanyu ji, who we lost the link to, thank you so much, and to our audience, thank you for watching. We will be at another sort of spot from the ground, bringing you voices and reports from the ground as we track the COVID story from the hinterland. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.